My son and daughter-in-law declared me dead, sold my home, and cashed my life insurance, all while celebrating their new beginning. They thought I'd never return, that I'd vanished forever in that so-called accident. But destiny had other plans. 2 months later, when they opened the front door of my house, I was already standing there, alive. That day, I learned one cruel truth: the dead can return. But not for love, only for justice. My name is Helen Carter, and I'm 64 years old. I live in Austin, Texas, a city I once believed would be my forever home. I spent over 35 years as a senior financial consultant, helping others build the kind of security I thought I already had. I knew everything about wealth, savings, insurance, and risk management, except how to protect myself from my own family. When I retired, I imagined spending my days quietly tending to my small garden, reading on the porch, and enjoying Sunday dinners with my son, Ethan, and his wife, Melissa. For a while, that dream seemed real. But now, looking back, I can see how every kind word, every visit, and every smile was just a setup for betrayal I never saw coming. Ethan was my only child. After my husband passed away, I poured all my love into raising him. He had his father's sharp eyes but none of his steady heart. He grew up ambitious, always chasing money, always wanting more. Still, I believed he would settle down and live a good life. When he married Melissa Walker, a charming, confident woman with a perfect smile, I thought my son had finally found someone who would keep him grounded. I was wrong. Melissa knew how to make everyone like her. She'd call me Mom, bring me flowers, and post pictures of us online as if we were the perfect family. But behind that warmth was calculation. She always had questions about my work, my investments, my retirement funds. I used to laugh it off, thinking she was just curious or learning how to manage finances herself. But there was something in her tone, something about the way she listened when I mentioned my insurance policies, that should have warned me. They visited me often, especially after Ethan's business started to struggle. He had opened a small trading company, trying to make it big in the financial market. I remember him telling me, "Mom, we're so close to turning it around." His voice trembled slightly that day, though I pretended not to notice. I told him I was proud of him, that failure was just another word for experience. I didn't realize he had already crossed that invisible line between hope and desperation. One evening, Melissa suggested something I found heartwarming at first. "Mom," she said with her gentle smile, "you've worked so hard all your life. Why don't we take you on a little trip for your birthday this year? You need a break, and we'd love to spend some quality time together." My heart melted instantly. It had been years since we'd gone anywhere as a family. I thought maybe this was their way of showing love. I said yes without hesitation. The days leading up to that trip were filled with excitement, or at least, mine were. I baked Ethan's favorite lemon pie, packed neatly folded clothes, and even brought along my husband's old camera to capture new memories. Melissa took care of all the arrangements. "Don't worry about a thing, Mom," she said, her tone smooth and assuring. "Just relax and let us handle everything." It felt nice to be cared for again, even if only for a moment. But there were small things I didn't notice back then. The way Melissa insisted on driving herself, the way Ethan kept whispering to her whenever I stepped out of the room. There was a look in their eyes, half anxiety, half anticipation, that I couldn't quite understand. Still, I brushed it off. When you love someone deeply, you don't look for the monster behind their smile. The night before the trip, I sat by my window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. I thought of how lucky I was, a comfortable home, savings in the bank, and a family who cared. If someone had told me then that in less than 48 hours, my own son would declare me dead, I would have laughed at the absurdity. But that's the cruel thing about betrayal: it doesn't knock, it arrives disguised as love. When morning came, Ethan and Melissa arrived early, cheerful as ever. Melissa wore a soft pink dress and sunglasses that covered half her face, and Ethan looked unusually restless. "Ready, Mom?" he asked. I nodded, locking the door behind me, completely unaware that I was stepping out of my home for what they believed would be the last time. The drive started peacefully enough. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the highway, and I remember thinking how beautiful Texas looked that day. I sat in the back seat, humming softly to an old tune that my husband used to play. Ethan was quiet, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Melissa talked the most, asking me about my favorite memories from when Ethan was a child, laughing at my old stories, and pretending to be the perfect daughter-in-law. But every time our eyes met through the rearview mirror, there was something cold in hers. Something I couldn't explain then but can still feel even now. We stopped halfway for lunch at a small diner off the highway. I noticed Melissa whispering to Ethan near the restroom. When they came back, their smiles looked stretched, like masks. Ethan barely touched his food. He kept checking his phone, avoiding my questions. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" I asked gently. "Yeah, Mom," he replied without looking up. "Just a few business messages." I wanted to believe him, so I did. Because that's what mothers do, we believe in our children, even when we shouldn't. Later that evening, we reached the hill country. The air smelled of pine and wet soil after the rain. Melissa suggested we stay overnight at a cabin she had booked. It was isolated but cozy, surrounded by tall trees and winding dirt roads. "It's peaceful here," I told her with a smile. "Yes," she said quietly. "Almost too peaceful." I didn't understand what she meant until much later. We had dinner by candlelight, Melissa's idea again. She opened a bottle of wine, and we toasted to family. I noticed she didn't drink much herself. Ethan barely spoke, his hands trembled slightly as he refilled my glass. "You two seem nervous," I joked lightly. "Is something wrong?" Melissa laughed softly, her voice trembling just enough to sound real. "No, Mom, just tired from driving." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. It was the first time I felt a chill crawl up my spine. That night, I couldn't sleep. I woke up around 2 a.m. and heard faint voices outside the cabin. I peeked through the window. Ethan and Melissa stood near the car, whispering harshly. I caught only fragments: "after tomorrow, papers, and insurance." My heart skipped a beat. I told myself I was imagining things. I trusted them too much to believe they were planning something dark. I went back to bed, trying to calm my thoughts, unaware that the nightmare had already begun. The next morning, Melissa was all smiles again. She made me coffee and said we'd take a scenic route on our way back to Austin. "You'll love the view from the ridge," she said brightly. "It's breathtaking." I remember her exact words because later, that word, breathtaking, would echo in my mind in the most horrifying way. We drove along the narrow mountain road, the landscape beautiful and vast. Ethan turned up the radio, but his grip on the steering wheel was tight, his knuckles white. Melissa kept looking back at me, forcing small talk. "Mom," she said suddenly, "you've had such a wonderful career. Did you ever think of updating your will or insurance now that you're retired?" I smiled faintly. "It's all taken care of," I said. "Everything's organized." She exchanged a glance with Ethan. I didn't think much of it, until the next moment shattered everything. As we curved around the steep ridge, the car jolted violently. Ethan shouted something I couldn't hear over the screech of tires. Melissa screamed. The steering wheel spun out of control. "Hold on, Mom," Ethan yelled. The car skidded toward the edge. My heart pounded as the world tilted sideways, the sky and ground spinning together. Then came the crash. A deafening explosion of metal, glass, and fire. Everything went black. When I opened my eyes, there was smoke everywhere. My seatbelt had snapped, and I was lying on the ground, half conscious, half broken. My leg throbbed, my vision blurred. I could hear voices above them. Ethan's voice, low and urgent, "It's done. She's gone." Melissa replied coldly, "Good. Now call the police before the fire spreads." And then silence. They didn't even check if I was breathing. They just left me there, assuming the flames would finish the job. But destiny wasn't ready to let me go. Somewhere between pain and darkness, I heard the faint rumble of an approaching truck. The headlights cut through the smoke, and a man's voice shouted, "Hey! Someone's alive down there." That was the moment the world pulled me back from the edge of death. When I woke again, I was in a hospital bed, my body covered in bruises and bandages. The nurse smiled and said, "You're lucky to be alive, ma'am." But all I could think of was Ethan's voice, calm, detached, certain. It's done. She's gone. That single sentence would haunt me for the rest of my life. The first few days in the hospital were a blur of pain and confusion. Every time I tried to open my eyes, I saw flashes of fire, heard the sound of twisting metal, and felt the crushing silence that followed Ethan's words. The doctors said I had a concussion, 3 broken ribs, and a fractured leg. But those injuries were nothing compared to the wound inside my chest. My heart wasn't just broken, it was burning. My own son, the boy I had carried, fed, and sacrificed everything for, had left me to die. I didn't tell anyone my real name at first. I was terrified that Ethan or Melissa might come back to make sure I was truly gone. The nurse called me Mrs. Carter, and I didn't correct her. I pretended to have memory gaps so no one would contact my family. I needed time to think, to breathe, to survive. Weeks passed. The physical wounds began to heal, but sleep never came easy. Every night I woke up sweating, replaying that moment. The look in Ethan's eyes before the crash, the relief in Melissa's voice when she said, "Good. She's gone." Those words echoed like thunder. One morning, a doctor brought me my belongings that had been found near the crash site, a half-burnt wallet, my wedding ring, and the old photograph of Ethan as a child. I stared at it for a long time, tracing the smile of the boy who once used to hold my hand on his first day of school. I whispered to that photograph, "Why, Ethan? Why me?" After 6 weeks, I was well enough to walk with crutches. The hospital staff helped me contact the local authorities to recover my identification. When I told them I'd lost my papers in the crash, they checked the records. That's when the truth hit me like lightning. The officer looked at me strangely and said, "Mrs. Carter, that's impossible. According to our system, you're dead." He showed me a digital copy of my death certificate. My name, Helen Carter, listed as deceased. Cause of death, car explosion, verified by next of kin, Ethan Carter. My hands shook as I read it. There must be some mistake, I whispered, but deep down, I knew there wasn't. They had declared me dead. Officially, legally, completely erased me from existence. When the officer asked who I wanted to contact for verification, I said, "No one." I thanked him, took the paper, and walked out quietly, my mind spinning. The next day, I went online from the hospital's computer, using a temporary account, and what I found made me sick. Ethan and Melissa had posted about my tragic passing. Friends and relatives had commented with sympathy. There was even a photo of them standing together, smiling sadly, thanking everyone for their prayers. A few days later, a headline on a local news site froze my blood. Family of late financial consultant Helen Carter receives $1.2 million insurance payout. I stared at the article for a long time, numb. The story described how a loving son and his wife had endured a terrible loss but found comfort in moving forward. There was even a picture of them standing in front of my home, with a new board above the gate, the Walker residence. That name cut deeper than any wound. It was Melissa's last name. She had erased mine, erased my husband's legacy, erased everything we built. For a while, I just sat there, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how far their greed could go. It wasn't enough that they wanted my money, they wanted my identity, my life. That night, I couldn't sleep. I asked a nurse for a piece of paper and a pen. My hands trembled as I wrote a single sentence. If they wanted me gone, I'll return not as their mother, but as their reckoning. The next morning, I requested discharge. The hospital tried to persuade me to stay longer, but I refused. I had a plan. It wasn't revenge, not in the way movies show it. It was justice. Cold, deliberate, and undeniable. I contacted one person I knew I could trust, Martha Evans, my old friend from college. She had become a defense attorney years ago, one of the best in the state. When she answered the phone, her voice trembled. "Helen? Oh my God, Helen. They said you were dead." "I was," I said quietly. "At least, that's what they wanted." Martha drove 3 hours that same evening to meet me. When she saw the state I was in, bruised, limping, thinner than ever, her eyes filled with tears. "Tell me everything," she said firmly, pulling out her notepad. I told her everything: the crash, the whispers, the fake death certificate, the insurance article. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she leaned back, deep in thought. "This isn't just fraud," she said finally. "This is attempted murder. And we're going to prove it." Her words lit a fire inside me, a fire I thought had died in that car. For the first time in months, I felt something other than pain. I felt purpose. Martha explained that we needed evidence: the forged certificate, the insurance transfer, the car inspection report. "We'll gather everything quietly," she said. "They think you're dead. Let's keep it that way, until the moment we strike." That night, as I lay in the motel bed Martha had arranged for me, I whispered to myself, "You thought you buried me, Ethan. But you buried your own soul instead." The next morning, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My face was tired, my hair streaked with gray, my eyes lined with scars that no surgery could fix. But behind them burned something stronger than fear: truth. And truth was coming home. The days that followed were a storm of quiet planning. Martha and I knew we couldn't rush anything. We needed proof: solid, legal, undeniable evidence that would expose Ethan and Melissa's lies in front of everyone. But before we could do that, I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. I needed to go back home. We drove to Austin one evening, just as the sun was setting. The highway stretched endlessly before us, glowing orange under the fading light. I sat in silence, my fingers gripping the edge of the seat. The last time I'd been on that road, I was a passenger on my way to what my son thought would be my funeral pyre. Now, I was coming back as a ghost in the eyes of the world, but one determined to reclaim her life. As we turned onto my old street, my heart began to race. I knew every corner, every mailbox, every tree. And then I saw it: my house. The front yard I used to fill with tulips was now trimmed and cold, stripped of all color. The porch lights glowed dimly against a new wooden board nailed to the gate. The Walker residence. My breath caught. For a moment, I couldn't move. Martha looked at me gently. "Do you want to leave?" she asked softly. "No," I whispered. "This was my home. My husband built this porch. My son learned to walk on that lawn. I won't let them erase me." We parked down the street and watched from a distance. Through the window I could see them, Ethan and Melissa, laughing, drinking wine, living the life they stole from me. They looked happy, radiant even, surrounded by new furniture I didn't recognize. Melissa wore jewelry I knew too well: it was mine. The pearl necklace my husband had given me on our 25th anniversary gleamed against her throat. I felt my stomach twist. "She's using my pearls," I whispered, trembling. Martha squeezed my hand. "You'll get them back. And a lot more." Over the next few days, Martha and I began to build the case piece by piece. We started with the death certificate. Through one of her legal contacts, she obtained a copy of the document that declared me deceased. There it was: my name, my birth date, my signature. Only the signature wasn't mine. "They forged this," Martha said, her voice cold. "And whoever notarized it helped them." She traced the notary seal to a man named Greg Sanders, who had a history of issuing illegal verifications for a fee. When we confronted him, he turned pale the moment he saw me. "I thought you were dead," he stammered. "Not quite," I replied. "You helped them fake my death, didn't you?" He nodded, trembling. "I didn't know, ma'am. They said you were already gone. They just needed a seal to close the file. They paid me $500. Martha leaned forward. "You'll testify to that in court?" He nodded again, faster this time. "Yes, absolutely. I'll cooperate." Next, we looked into the insurance payout. Martha requested access to the transaction details through her firm. The paper trail told a story of greed and precision. Within 10 days of my death, Ethan and Melissa had filed the claim. Within a month, they received a wire transfer of $1.2 million, half of which was moved to an offshore account under Melissa's maiden name, Walker Holdings LLC. "They didn't even wait," I said bitterly. "They couldn't." Martha sighed. "Greed never waits, Helen. It devours everything in its path, including the people who feed it." Every new piece of evidence brought me both relief and pain. Relief, because we were closing in on the truth. Pain, because every signature, every bank slip, every document carried the fingerprints of my own son. Late one night, I sat by the motel window, watching rain hit the glass. I thought of Ethan as a little boy, the way he used to hold my hand when he was scared of thunderstorms. I had spent my life teaching him to save, to plan, to build. I never imagined he would use those same lessons to destroy me. When morning came, Martha told me she had one more thing to show me. She pulled up a news report on her laptop. The headline read, "Austin couple invests in local businesses with mother's insurance money." There they were, smiling for the camera, Ethan in a new tailored suit, Melissa in a designer dress, speaking about turning tragedy into opportunity. The interviewer called them an inspiring couple. Martha looked at me. "Are you ready to let the world see the other side of that story?" I nodded slowly. Yes. But first, I want them to see me. That evening, I made a decision. We wouldn't reveal anything yet, not until everything was airtight. But I would go back to that house one last time, just to stand in front of it, not as a ghost, but as the woman they couldn't kill. We drove again to my old neighborhood. The house looked the same, quiet, perfect, stolen. Melissa's car was parked outside. I stepped out of the car and stood by the gate, staring at the sign, "The Walker Residence." My hands shook, but not from fear this time. From fury. From defiance. From something deeper than pain, a need for justice. I reached out and touched the cold metal of the gate. For a long moment, I just stood there, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. Then I whispered softly, "This isn't over. You took my name off this house, but you'll never take my truth." Behind me, Martha placed a hand on my shoulder. "Helen," she said, "it's time to bring them down." And in that quiet, rain-soaked street, I finally felt alive again. Not as the woman they left to die, but as the mother they would soon wish had stayed dead. Martha and I spent the next several days carefully collecting every document, every record, and every whisper of proof that tied Ethan and Melissa to the fraud. The deeper we went, the clearer their betrayal became. Yet, with every discovery, I felt the same question clawing at my heart: how could my own son do this to me? We stayed at a small motel outside the city limits. Martha worked late into the night, laptop open, her screen glowing in the dark room. I often sat by the window, staring at the streetlights, remembering the last time I had seen Ethan as a little boy. Back then, he used to wait for me by the porch, holding a sketch he'd made in school, yelling, "Look, Mom. I drew our family." The memory hurt now, because that same child had grown into a man who erased me from his world entirely. One evening, Martha received an email from her contact at the insurance company. "They filed the claim 2 days after the accident," she said. "The payout cleared in less than a week." She paused, scrolling through the document. "Helen, they used your hospital discharge papers as proof of death. Melissa forged your signature again." My chest tightened. I could barely speak. "They couldn't even wait to bury me properly," I whispered. Martha's expression hardened. "No, Helen. They didn't want to bury you, they wanted to replace you." The next morning, I asked Martha to take me somewhere. Somewhere I hadn't been in a long time. She didn't ask why. We drove to the cemetery on the outskirts of Austin. The air was heavy with the scent of rain-soaked grass. Rows of gravestones stretched before us, some new, some forgotten. I walked slowly, leaning on my cane, until I saw it. My own name carved into a gray marble stone. Helen Carter, beloved mother and wife. 1959 to 2023. My knees gave way, and I sank to the ground. For a long time, I just stared at it, unable to breathe. "They buried an empty box," I said finally, my voice breaking. "An empty box, and called it me." Martha knelt beside me, her hand firm on my shoulder. "They took your name," she said softly, "but they can't take your truth. You're still here. That's what matters." I wiped my tears, looking at the headstone one last time. "No," I said quietly, "that's what they'll regret." After that day, I stopped thinking of myself as a victim. I was no longer the woman who barely survived a crash. I was the woman who came back from the grave to expose the people who put her there. Martha helped me get a new ID issued, under a temporary alias. It was safer that way, she said, until we filed the case officially. During that time, I stayed hidden. The world still thought Helen Carter was dead, and I intended to keep it that way until the perfect moment arrived. Every day, I practiced walking again, forcing strength into my injured leg. Pain became my ally. Every ache reminded me of the fire I'd escaped and the lies I was about to burn down. Then, one evening, as Martha and I reviewed the documents, she looked up at me with determination. "It's time," she said. "We have everything we need. The forged papers, the bank records, the notary's statement, it's enough to take them down." "Then let's do it," I said. "No," she replied. "Not yet. You need to face them first." I frowned. "Why?" "Because," she said, leaning back in her chair, "when this goes to court, they'll try to play innocent. They'll cry, they'll beg, they'll say it was all a misunderstanding. But if you walk into that house, alive, standing, and unbroken, you'll shatter every lie they've ever told before they even open their mouths." Her words lit something inside me, a mix of dread and defiance. Could I really face them? The son who betrayed me. The woman who poisoned his heart with greed. Part of me still wished it wasn't real, that there was some hidden reason for what they'd done. But I had already seen my own gravestone. There was no innocence left to hope for. The next morning, I dressed carefully. Simple clothes, my hair tied back, no makeup. Martha waited by the car, holding a small camera. "For documentation," she explained. We drove to the house just before dusk. The neighborhood was quiet, bathed in a golden evening light. My stomach twisted as we turned into my old street. I could almost hear the echoes of my past, the laughter from old summers, the smell of my husband's coffee in the mornings, Ethan's childish giggle when he used to chase butterflies in the yard. And then, reality hit. The house that once held those memories now belonged to strangers wearing familiar faces. Ethan's car was parked in the driveway. Melissa stood near the porch, talking on the phone, laughing. Her laughter, once sweet and melodic, now sounded cruel. I waited until she hung up. Then I stepped out of the car. She turned at the sound of the door closing. For a second, her expression froze, her smile fading as she stared at me. Her phone slipped from her hand and hit the ground. "No," she whispered. That's impossible." Ethan came out of the house, irritated. "What's wrong, Melis?" His words died mid-sentence. He stood there, pale, trembling, unable to look away. I walked toward them slowly, the cane tapping against the pavement. "You didn't expect to see me again," I said quietly. "You thought the fire would hide your sins. But here I am." Melissa's lips trembled. "You're dead." She couldn't finish. Ethan took a step back. "Mom, I can explain." "No," I said, my voice steady. "You've explained enough. Now it's my turn." Behind me, Martha stood silently, recording everything. The truth had just walked through their front door, and it was wearing my face. The air around us felt heavy, like time itself had stopped. Ethan stood frozen near the porch steps, his face pale as marble. Melissa's hands shook. She clutched the railing as if the ground beneath her might give way. I took another slow step toward them, the sound of my cane tapping against the driveway echoing louder than my voice. "Surprised to see me?" I asked softly. My tone was calm, almost gentle, but it carried something that made both of them step back. "You should be. After all, you buried me, didn't you?" Melissa's lips parted, her eyes darting between me and Ethan. This isn't possible. I died." I finished for her. "Yes, I know. I saw the certificate. The one you both signed." I turned my gaze to Ethan. "You signed it as my next of kin. Do you remember, Ethan?" His voice cracked. "Mom, listen. It wasn't like that." I laughed, quietly, bitterly. "Wasn't like what?" "That you took my name, my money, my home, and called it love." I pointed toward the wooden sign nailed above the door. "You even renamed my house. The Walker Residence." How fitting, Melissa. Your name on everything that used to be mine. Melissa tried to regain her composure, straightening her posture. Helen, you don't understand. Ethan thought you were dead. We were grieving. Grieving? I interrupted sharply. Is that what you call buying new jewelry with my insurance money? Is that what grief looks like? Smiling for news cameras, investing in businesses, pretending to mourn while celebrating your payday. Ethan took a step closer, his eyes red. Mom, please stop. We didn't mean for any of this to happen. It just got out of control. I looked at him, my son, the boy I once thought was my world. Out of control? You cut my brakes, Ethan. You left me to die in a burning car. How much more in control could you be? For a moment, there was silence, thick and suffocating. Melissa's breathing quickened. You can't prove any of this, she said suddenly, her voice trembling but defiant. There's no evidence. No one will believe you. That was the moment Martha stepped forward from behind me, calm and composed, holding a folder. Actually, she said smoothly, we can prove everything. Melissa's face went white. Who are you? Martha Evans. Attorney at law, she replied. And I've spent the last few weeks collecting every document, every forgery, and every payment trail you two left behind. She opened the folder, revealing copies of the forged death certificate, the bank transfers, and the notary's signed statement. You may want to call your lawyer. Ethan ran a trembling hand through his hair. This isn't happening, he muttered under his breath. Oh, it's happening, Martha said. And soon, the whole city will know what you did. I stepped forward, standing just a few feet from Ethan now. When I was lying in that hospital bed, broken and burned, I kept wondering what could make a child turn against his own mother. I thought maybe you were desperate, maybe she pushed you into it. But now I see it clearly, you didn't need a reason. You just needed an opportunity. Ethan looked up, tears in his eyes. I thought you were gone, Mom. I swear I thought you were gone. Melissa said the car exploded, that there was no chance. I shook my head. No, Ethan. You didn't think. You decided. You decided that my life was worth less than your bills, that my love was something to cash out when convenient. And she, I turned to Melissa, taught you how to smile while doing it. Melissa's eyes narrowed, her fear shifting into anger. You can't prove we meant to hurt you. The brakes failed, it was an accident. Martha raised an eyebrow. The mechanic's report says otherwise. There were tool marks on the brake lines. You both signed the repair order 3 days before the crash. The same garage confirmed it was tampered with deliberately. Ethan's knees buckled. He sat down on the porch steps, his head in his hands. Oh God, he whispered. Melissa stepped back, shaking her head. No, I didn't. He did it. He planned it, not me. Her voice cracked into panic, and I felt an odd stillness inside me. Not satisfaction, not anger, just emptiness. Watching them turn on each other didn't heal me. It only confirmed what I already knew. Whatever love once lived in that house was long dead. Martha began recording everything on her phone, documenting their words, their panic. Keep talking, she said quietly. Every word helps. Melissa's voice grew louder, frantic. I told you it would go wrong. I told you we shouldn't do it. Ethan lifted his head, rage flashing in his eyes. You wanted the money. You said it was the only way. Their argument exploded into chaos, but I barely heard it. My focus stayed on that wooden sign, the symbol of their greed, their lies. I reached up, pulled it off the wall, and dropped it at my feet. The sound of the wood cracking echoed like thunder through the quiet street. This house was never yours, I said softly. Not its walls, not its name, not even its sin. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Martha had already called them before we arrived. As the flashing lights approached, I turned away from Ethan and Melissa. You two should pray, I said without looking back. Because the only thing left that can save you now is mercy, and I don't have any left. When the officers arrived, Melissa tried to talk her way out of it, her voice trembling with false innocence. Ethan didn't say a word. He just stared at the ground, tears dripping onto the steps where I once sat to read him bedtime stories. One of the officers asked, "Ma'am, are you Helen Carter?" I nodded slowly. "Yes. And I'm here to file a report for fraud, forgery, and attempted murder." The officer looked at me with disbelief, then at Ethan. "Is that true?" Ethan couldn't answer. His silence was all the confession anyone needed. As the police took them away, Melissa screamed Ethan's name, begging him to say something. But he didn't. He couldn't. I stood there, watching the life they'd stolen crumble around them. The night was quiet again, and for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. Martha came to stand beside me. "It's over," she said gently. I looked at her and shook my head. "No. It's just beginning." Because justice wasn't just about punishment, it was about truth. And the truth was finally free. The morning of the trial felt unreal. The courthouse in downtown Austin buzzed with reporters, photographers, and curious onlookers. My story had already begun to spread, the mother who came back from the grave. Cameras flashed as I walked through the marble steps with Martha by my side. My cane clicked against the floor, each sound steady, deliberate, unbroken. I wasn't here as a victim anymore. I was here as a survivor demanding truth. Inside the courtroom, Ethan and Melissa sat at the defense table. Melissa's usual confidence had vanished. Her hair was tied back hastily, her eyes red. Ethan looked worse, tired, pale, and hollow. When his gaze met mine, he quickly looked away. For the first time, I saw shame in his eyes, but it was too late for redemption. The trial opened with the prosecutor outlining the charges: insurance fraud, forgery, and attempted murder. The room was silent except for the rhythmic clicking of pens. Martha stood tall, her voice calm but commanding as she began presenting our evidence. First came the forged death certificate. She displayed the document on the projector, my name in bold letters under deceased. Then she zoomed in on the notary's seal. "This seal," she said, pointing at it, "was purchased illegally. The notary, Mr. Greg Sanders, has provided a sworn statement confirming that he was paid $500 to certify a death that never happened." The notary himself testified next. His voice trembled as he spoke. "They told me their mother had passed away. They just needed the paperwork expedited. I didn't know she was alive. When I saw her picture on the news, I couldn't sleep." Melissa lowered her head, whispering something to her lawyer. Ethan sat motionless, his jaw tight. Next, Martha revealed the financial records: the $1.2 million insurance payout, the bank transfers, and the offshore account under Walker Holdings LLC. The courtroom gasped. Not only did the defendants forge their mother's death, Martha said, her voice echoing through the hall, they profited from it. They erased her identity for cash. Melissa's lawyer objected, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. But the evidence was overwhelming. Martha calmly handed the judge the mechanic's report, the final nail in their coffin. It detailed the deliberate tampering with the brake system, tool marks, removed safety pins, fresh grease where none should have been. The prosecutor asked me to take the stand. I stood slowly, my hands trembling just enough to remind me I was still human. I took the oath and sat down, facing the room that had once believed I was dead. "Mrs. Carter," the judge said gently, "please tell the court what happened that day." I took a deep breath. "It was my 65th birthday," I began. "My son and daughter-in-law offered to take me on a trip. I thought it was a gift. I thought they wanted to spend time with me." My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. Instead, they took me to a mountain road, and when the car crashed, they left me there. They declared me dead before I'd even opened my eyes. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. I looked directly at Ethan. "You didn't just steal my money, Ethan. You stole my name, my peace, my faith in the one person I loved most." Ethan's eyes filled with tears, his lips trembling. "Mom, Don't call me that," I interrupted sharply. "You lost that right the day you signed my death certificate." Martha approached and placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "No further questions," she said. Then it was the defense's turn. Melissa's lawyer tried to shift the blame. My client was manipulated by her husband. She had no part in the planning of this terrible event. Martha countered immediately, producing text messages retrieved from Melissa's phone records. Messages between her and Ethan, planning the insurance claim and the forged signature. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Melissa's composure shattered. "He told me to do it," she screamed suddenly, pointing at Ethan. "He said it was just paperwork, that she'd already planned it herself." Ethan slammed his hand on the table. "You were the one who wanted the money, Melissa. You said it was the only way out." The judge pounded the gavel. "Order in the court." I sat still, watching them tear each other apart. The couple who once conspired so perfectly together now destroyed themselves with every word. When the chaos settled, Martha delivered her closing argument. "Your Honor, this isn't a story about money. It's a story about betrayal. A mother who gave her life to her child, only for that child to trade her for profit. The evidence is clear, the motive undeniable, and the damage irreversible." She paused, her eyes meeting the judge's. Helen Carter came back from the grave to speak her truth. Now it's time for justice to speak for her. The judge nodded solemnly and recessed the court for deliberation. The jurors left, their faces heavy with disbelief and sorrow. Hours passed in silence. Finally, as the clock struck 5, the courtroom doors opened. The jurors filed back in. The foreman handed the verdict to the judge. The judge read slowly, each word ringing like a bell. "We, the jury, find the defendants, Ethan Carter and Melissa Walker, guilty on all charges." Gasps filled the room. Melissa cried out, collapsing into her chair. Ethan sat in stunned silence, tears streaming down his face. The judge continued, his voice firm. "For the crimes of fraud, forgery, and attempted murder, this court sentences the defendants to 20 years in state prison." I closed my eyes, exhaling deeply. The sound of the gavel striking the desk felt like the end of a storm. Martha turned to me, her eyes soft. "It's over, Helen." But as I watched the officers handcuff Ethan and Melissa, I knew it wasn't truly over. The law had done its part, but my heart still carried the weight of everything that had been lost. When Ethan was led past me, he stopped for just a moment. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. I looked at him one last time. "No, Ethan," I said quietly. "You're not sorry. You're just caught." He lowered his head as they took him away. Outside the courthouse, the evening sun was setting, just like the day it all began. Reporters called out my name, cameras flashing, microphones reaching for my words. But I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Truth had already spoken loud enough for everyone to hear. The courthouse doors closed behind me, and for the first time in months, I felt the air on my face without fear. The setting sun cast long, golden streaks across the steps, and each one felt like a promise, of peace, of closure, of finally being seen again. Martha walked beside me, silent but strong, the kind of silence that carries more meaning than words ever could. The crowd outside erupted as soon as they saw me. Reporters, cameras, flashes. People shouting questions I couldn't answer, voices overlapping like waves. "Mrs. Carter, how does it feel to see justice served? Did you forgive your son? What's next for you?" I paused on the last step, tightened my grip on my cane, and looked at them all. "Justice isn't about winning," I said softly. "It's about truth." And today, truth came home. The microphones lowered. For a moment, everyone went quiet. Then Martha gently guided me through the crowd and into her car. We drove away from the chaos, the city lights fading behind us. I watched Austin pass by, the skyline I had loved, the streets where I had once walked with Ethan as a boy. Everything looked the same, yet nothing felt familiar anymore. We stopped by my house, my real home. The police tape had been removed, and the board that once read the Walker residence was gone. A new sign hung in its place, Carter Home. My hands trembled as I traced the letters. For the first time, it didn't feel like just a name, it felt like reclamation. Inside, the house smelled faintly of fresh paint and lavender. Martha had arranged for a cleaning crew to restore everything. The furniture was back where it belonged, the family portraits rehung, and the pearl necklace Melissa had stolen sat neatly in a small velvet box on the table. I picked it up, feeling the smooth pearls slide between my fingers. "He gave this to me the year Ethan was born," I said quietly. Martha smiled faintly. "It belongs to you again." I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. It always did. They just forgot that. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house slowly, each room filled with echoes of the past. The laughter that once lived here was gone, replaced by a quiet that felt both peaceful and painful. I stopped by the old rocking chair by the window, the same one I used to sit in when Ethan was a baby. The wood creaked gently under my hand. "You were my everything," I whispered into the darkness. "I would have given you the world. But you wanted more than that. You wanted me gone." I sat there for a long time, listening to the soft hum of the night. Outside, the garden lights glowed faintly, and I noticed something small and green pushing through the soil, a tulip sprout. Life returning to a place that once felt dead. The next morning, I visited the cemetery one last time. The fake headstone still stood there, weathered and gray. I brought a hammer with me. With every strike, the marble cracked a little more until the name Helen Carter shattered into dust. When it was done, I stood there, breathing hard, feeling lighter than I had in years. "I buried her today," I said softly. "The woman they tried to kill. The woman they called dead. She's gone. What's left is someone they'll never break again." As I turned to leave, a cool breeze swept through the air, carrying the scent of rain and earth. For the first time, I smiled, not out of joy, but out of acceptance. A few weeks later, Martha came by with a copy of the newspaper. The headline read, "Justice served in Helen Carter case, son and daughter-in-law convicted." The article called me the Texas Miracle Mother, a phrase that felt both strange and bittersweet. I wasn't a miracle. I was proof of what truth can do when you refuse to stay silent. Martha poured us each a cup of coffee and said, "You could move somewhere new, Helen. Start fresh." I looked around the house, the home that had witnessed both my love and my betrayal. "No," I said quietly. "This is where I belong. This is where I'll live the rest of my life. Not in fear. Not in pain. But in peace." That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I sat on my porch, the same one I had left on that terrible morning months ago. The world around me felt still. The cicadas hummed softly, and the sky turned a deep shade of gold. I closed my eyes and whispered to the wind, "I didn't die that night, but their conscience surely did." And with that, I leaned back, letting the quiet swallow everything that had ever hurt me. For the first time, I wasn't a victim or a survivor. I was simply Helen Carter, the woman who came back from the grave, not for revenge, but for justice. And that was my story, a story of betrayal, survival, and justice. If you were in my place, what would you have done when your own family tried to erase you for money? Would you forgive them, or walk away forever? Tell me in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories like mine. Because sometimes, the truth is far more powerful than fiction.